Hey everyone, welcome in to another edition of the Winning Plays podcast. My name is Brian Robb. I am joined for the first time in a little bit by the one and only Michael Pina, fresh off of killing it for GQ for pretty much the entire lockout period. But before I talk to him, we have to hand out a congratulations to new pop Rich Levine. Everyone, family and little one are doing well at home. So yes, the winning plays applause from Mike. Mike, do you have any words of wisdom for Rich before we get into the pod?
As someone who is not a father, no, I have no words of wisdom, no advice, but Rich is a wise one, and I'm sure he'll do a wonderful job over the next rest of his life, I guess.
So obviously Rich is, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, but Rich will be on dad duty for the next several weeks. Ryan Bernardoni has been graciously pinch hitting as a guest co-host as well. Mike will be able to be in and out as well as the off season gets going here too. But Mike, we have we're heading into what could be a very quick NBA off season here. You know, I think some of us thought we would be waiting around till February or March initially when the season ended. That quickly has turned into potentially starting before Christmas. Mm-hmm. But we haven't talked to you since the Celtics season has come to a close, and there has been a lot of scuttlebutt in the last several weeks about what this team should do. We obviously have dissected Gordon Hayward trades to death here in the last week, along with other scenarios. Take us back to reality here to start. Where do you see this team is at heading into this offseason? And what do you want to see based off how this thing ended in Orlando for them?
I mean, I don't know if I'm in the majority or the minority or what the vibes are right now. Everything I read is usually geared towards they need an upgrade of some kind. You mentioned the Gordon Hayward trades. Packaging draft picks and trying to add an impact player right away. I mean, personally, I kind of just am fine with Gordon opting in to his contract and Jaylen Brown being better, Kemba Walker being healthy, Marcus Smart being Marcus Smart. And I guess so then, like, the number one priority for me would just be to sign Jason Tatum to a 5-year maximum contract. And hopefully you get that 5th year with no player option and you're able to negotiate that in there. And then you just are a contender next season through your internal improvement. And so I think just building around the margins, maybe adding, wisely using your, I think it's going to be the taxpayer mid-level, right? Like $5.7 million, somewhere around there. We don't really know the exact figures right now because the NBA is in a tornado. But yeah, there's a lot of first round picks. So maybe you want to trade up, maybe you want to trade back into later drafts. I don't know what their mentality is going to be. They obviously need to worry about the luxury tax going forward with Jason Tatum about to make all the money he's about to make. But I don't really see, there's nothing major that needs to happen in my opinion.
Yeah, so I agree. I mean, I think that's the most likely path just based on, the Hayward situation in terms of where this buzz that was talked about by Zach Lowe last week, amounts to, whether that's just simply his agent testing the market and finding out there's not much there, or whether Hayward actually wants to, play somewhere else beyond next season. If that happens, then, I do think you have to look into moving him if he is not going to be around, beyond next season, and he makes that clear. But other than that, I think your path is the most direct one. So I think it comes down to fortifying the bench a lot and figuring out, you have between the draft picks and some younger players on the roster, you do have a few chips to play left, and they're important ones because you're I mean, the draft treasure chest of assets runs out in 2 months. Like, you have no more extra first round picks after this draft. So would you, and I feel like, for trading out for future picks, I feel, given that, the high school players are going to come into play in the next couple of years, I feel like teams probably aren't going to want to trade future picks for ones in what's supposed to be like mediocre draft year.
Potentially. Yeah. I mean, that might be a tough one to swing for sure. But I just think that how they're financially set up right now, you're going to need value out of like rookie deals going forward, minimum contracts and rookie deals. So like, I don't know how you hit and maximize the value on these picks, but it would just be a real, like, I don't want them to go down the same path as Gershon Yabusele draft where Ante, yes. Where you're kind of like picking guys for reasons that are, potentially a draft and stash situation or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, you're just going to need to find value with these picks, and it's not ideal in this year's draft from everything that like I've read about this year's draft, to have this many firsts in a draft that might not have the type of impact player right away. But they just need to hit with this draft. It's pretty important.
So let's start with the bench, though. If we're assuming that the top 6 are coming back, which I think is a I'd put it at probably between 80 and 90% at this point, we'll say. I think the only other piece that could conceivably move besides Hayward is like a Smart, and I think the odds of that are very low for, given how much the front office and ownership is a huge fan of him. So this team has 12 guys under contract coming back for next year. There's obvious pieces to move on from in terms of like Vincent. But beyond that, like who do you want to be in the rotation next year coming back, and who do you want to be counted on, and what areas do you just want them to target on the bench, whether it is in the draft or free agency, because there's going to be a roster glut there, and you probably want to make decisions on that sooner rather than having, too many pieces on your bench that do the same thing like they kind of had last year at times.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that in terms of who's coming back that I'm kind of excited about to see their impact and their improvement, I think Grant Williams and Robert Williams are 2 really important players for the organization in the front court. And then Grant Williams is just kind of whatever position he needs to play, especially on the defensive end. So I think those 2 are really key. And then Robert Williams, if he takes a leap at the 5 spot and he's just able to give you consistent 20 plus minutes potentially in times where other bigs aren't playing or hurt or whatever, that's just like a huge luxury to have with his athleticism and what he brings to the defensive end. So I'm excited about those 2, I think. And then I'm intrigued by Romeo Langford being in the rotation this season. And I mean, it's really funny to like go back and think about that game where he got subbed in the bubble in the playoffs, and then he makes like 1 assist. I think he drove baseline. And
it's a great play. It's the play of the game.
It was a really smart play right away. Got an assist, and then he immediately hurt himself and was not seen again. So I think it was just like a really rough rookie year for him, but. Like, I'm not trying to compare him to Tyler Hero, but the possibility of having a rookie on your team who can contribute in a big game is real. And so, the expectations aren't through the roof for him, but the fact that he was even in that game, subbed in the second line was pretty, you have to have a lot of confidence in him if you're Brad Stevens. So I'm intrigued by him positionally and what he can bring to the table. going forward, particularly if this is his last season upcoming, if they don't re-sign him and kind of lose him for nothing, or trade him at the trade deadline or whatever they do with him. Romeo kind of coming into that spot is pretty fascinating in my opinion, given his pedigree. And then I don't know where, honestly, like in terms of finding a piece, I mean, I think that they would need another ball handler for sure. And so I don't really know if that ball handler needs to be someone who's more of a setup guy or more of kind of an offensive spark plug. But that's the type of piece, one of the two, I think is the type of piece that they should be looking at with their mid-level, if they do have a lot of faith in the young pieces that they have already in the front court and the two Williams. I'm calling them like the Williams brothers just because it's like easier, but I know that they're not related, but the Williams brothers.
So where it is going to be, so I actually just wrote about looking through the point guard like mid-level market, and it will be, well, first of all, are you done with Brad Wanamaker? Because if not, we're gonna have some words if you are.
I don't want to say I'm done with him. Like what money are we talking about? Is he coming back in on a veteran?
Yeah, like veterans
contract?
minimum or slightly above the veterans minimum. So like, I don't think he's gonna get much more than the veterans minimum, to be honest. So it's like that he can be restricted if the Celtics want him to be. And I can't imagine him costing in this market costing more than the veterans minimum. Like he played well, but not well enough to get like a real a serious like long-term contract.
I think it would be interesting from his perspective to come back, depending on the other moves that they make. Like if they want to upgrade at that spot and add some depth. If I was Brad Wanamaker, I don't think I would come back to Boston because I want to play.
Right.
So like, what are some names? I have a couple names just like off the top of my head, but what are some names that you like, some guys that you wrote about who you think could be valuable in that part of the rotation?
So if you're just looking at point guard, if you're thinking offense first for mid-level money, I think that the best name on that list conceivably in that price range is DJ Augustine. A proven three-point shooter who can distribute, is a size liability from a defensive standpoint. I can't see any team giving him more than mid-level. Maybe at this point of his career, he wants to win, so he takes a little bit less to come be, play a meaningful role. But he wants to start somewhere, and that's not going to be in Boston. But that's probably the best name in terms of pure, passing and shooting talent on the list. I'm not sure if that makes sense for this team, though, when you already have another 6-foot point guard in Kemba Walker.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of interesting to kind of tie into this conversation what's happening with the schedule going forward and how fast the season is going to be in the regular season, and how much teams are going to need to load manage their veterans. And so Kemba Walker is someone who I would doubt is going to be playing in all 72 games or 50 games or whatever it is. I think that that's someone that they're really going to be, given the money that he's owed, given what happened with his knee in the bubble and his performance down the stretch of the playoffs. Like that's someone who I'd want to manage and kind of massage his way through the regular season as much as possible. So I'm not too worried if I were to sign DJ that would they be kind of like replicating each other in terms of size, and that's not what you want. I don't think DJ would be on the floor at the end of a playoff game regardless. So I'd be fine with it. I'm a fan of his. Had a little bit of a down shooting year compared to his previous 2 years, but like he's just a really good outside shooter, really like competent setup man. So I like that. I like that pick. Can I throw a name at you who I don't know if he would be available financially. It would have to take a pay cut, but someone who recently said that he's really wanting to prioritize winning at this stage in his career. And that is, he's one of my least favorite players, so it's kind of funny that I'm saying this, but that is Jeff Teague.
Yeah, he's on my list too.
Oh,
Or just in terms of like mid-level I'm not even sure he's going to get a full mid-level. Just based, I mean, maybe he just watch, like, maybe you get him engaged somewhere, which Minnesota and Atlanta weren't good places for that for him the last couple of years. But when he's
Atlanta,
on,
I would throw out Atlanta.
I mean,
I would throw out Atlanta.
Minnesota is where you look at it and you're like, okay, there were all sorts of issues going on there. I guess for him, if you want to just talk offense, he's an interesting piece. If you want to see a guy just die on screens miserably, he's also your man.
Very fair. Very fair. That's a name that, I haven't been to, and he's getting up there in age a little bit, even though I'm older than him, which makes me feel really depressed. But he's getting up there a little bit. And I was never even really a huge fan of his, like even when he was an all-star in Atlanta that one year.
Yeah.
Something about his game just has always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But we're talking pure talent at $5 million for 1 year. Like, that's sure. Like, add them to what they have. Because, I mean, again, I'm just, like, I don't think they need to hit a home run with whoever they sign. I think whoever they sign needs to just come in and, like, fill a very narrow lane of competence. Because I think that the heaviest lifting will be on, I think Jalen's going to take another leap. I think he's going to be an all-star. And I think that Tatum's going to take like a sizable leap. So like the heavy offensive, like I don't need Jeff Teague to come in and take 10 shots a game.
Right.
Like I don't. So
that's the kind of guy, you're right, that won't be stealing shots from the guys you want. Like he can shoot, but he doesn't necessarily want to shoot. He wants to pass first, which works here. And so before we go into more names, like I think the more interesting thing to me in terms of like where you want to use this money heading into free agency if you're the Celtics is like, I don't mind Marcus Smart, the point guard, either. And so part of me wonders like, okay, if you're bringing in another point guard, then that kind of pushes Marcus off the ball more on offense. Or I mean, you obviously it's never bad to have multiple ball handlers on the floor, but it pushes him, a guy like Teague would push him away from primary ball handling duties when he is on the floor. And I'm not sure I want that. Like with Smart, like I would almost be just as well being like, all right, Smart, I want you going back to running the pick and roll and setting up guys, because you're pretty good at it when that was your main focus. But it is at the same time, it's nice to have that flexibility when you're managing Kemba, to have the extra pure ball handler that, you can slot in there, and then you can keep Smart coming off the bench if you want.
well, I have two other names then that are kind of different skill sets, but are functionally similar positions. One would be Austin Rivers, who I don't know if you're. What's up?
Player option for him?
The max for Austin Rivers. I like his. I don't know what his market's going to be, in his situation coming out of Houston, and he played a very specific type of basketball the past couple of years, and it would be a very different brand in Boston. But he's a bucket getter, really good 3-point shooter, or pretty good 3-point shooter, and like that's someone who can play off the ball, has a lot of experience playing off the ball in minutes with James Harden. And I don't know, I really liked him the last couple of years watching Houston as closely as I did. And like, I thought that it was a mistake Mike D'Antoni made not to close games with Austin Rivers. I thought he was one of their better, what he does for you dynamically is really important. And he's a pretty solid defensive player who gets after it. He's not a bad defender by any means. So I like Austin Rivers. And then also someone who's kind of just a little slighter, but a really good shooter and can come off pin downs and stuff. And you can play Marcus Smart at the point guard spot and have him handle the ball a lot, is Langston Galloway, who he's just a really good shooter, and you can't have enough shooting in today's league. So that's someone else I would look at and see kind of what's going on there and if they would have any interest.
Yeah, I think that's really good. If they don't find that shooter, in the draft, I think Galloway is a very logical fit in terms of just having someone who defenses have to pay attention to, which this team really hasn't had off the bench in a while, or, they've kind of trended away from it since the Ray Allen days. Does Reggie Jackson have anything left from what you watched with the Clippers in the postseason?
I don't think Reggie Jackson is washed up by any means. Is
he a good buy low target?
It's kind of an indictment that, and maybe it's not fair to Reggie, but that Doc Rivers, after the Clippers were eliminated, said that the number one thing they needed was a point guard. And then I think Kawhi Leonard echoed the sentiment, basically someone who could get the team in a functioning offense in a half-court set and run actions. And so, I don't know how you view Reggie Jackson. I mean, he's nominally a point guard, so it's a little bit of shade, but at the same time, he's more, I think, been more score first.
Yeah, he's always been a shoot first guy wherever he's been.
Right. And I think but I mean, he's an okay shooter, and as a spot up threat, he was pretty good with the Clippers after they got him. I don't know, it's something about the shot selection and his understanding of where he's at in the hierarchy. I don't think it would be a good fit.
That's a guy who would be stealing away shots from the guys you'd want. I think if him, a Jordan Clarkson, who I feel is going to get mid-level money too, Utah could bring him back, but that's the kind of guy that I think they'll stay away from, knowing that for as much as he's going to help you in certain games, he's also going to, keep Tatum and Brown from averaging 20 to 25 shots a night on certain points, which I don't think the C's want.
From BC, though.
I mean, Jackson for sure. There was
that's your boy.
The last few glory days of BC basketball was with Reggie Jackson on the floor, and it feels like 10 years ago because it was. So that is
very sad.
All right, so those are the offense first kind of backcourt options. Defense first, mid-level guys. Most of these guys are restricted. Chris Dunn doesn't really make sense, I feel unless you're moving on for Smart for some reason, which I don't see happening, because Dunn...
I love him so much, but I agree.
It's Smart at the beginning of his career with his jump shots. You're looking at a 30% three-point shooter that really can't do much else, and I don't think, that's enough of an upgrade on a Wanamaker to pull that trigger. What Michael Carter-Williams, another Orlando guy, who kind of had a resurgence down there. Again, this is strictly a defensive pickup, but I do think the Celtics could use, another guy like this for the right money. I don't think you'd pay him much more than the minimum, to be honest, even if that, and maybe that'd be your only offer. But he did seem to kind of figure it out in Orlando after a pretty rough few years around the league. And he is a Massachusetts native, so that would be fun if he wanted to come back here. But I'm not sure there's enough opportunity for him here to do that.
Yeah. Not a huge fan of that. I think it's more just he reminds me so much of what his ceiling as a player is kind of what Evan Turner was a few years ago.
Well, Brad will love him. Get him in here then, because that's
what I'm saying is then just sign Evan Turner, right?
Yeah.
So, but I don't think that's in the cards. Maybe it is, I don't know, but not for the mid-level. But
No, that'd be a minimum
yeah,
signing.
yeah, I kind of feel like, yeah, Michael Carter Williams getting the mid. Like, I don't know who would pay. I mean, he's a guard who can't shoot still. Like,
Yeah,
I just,
I feel
yeah,
like yeah, it'd be surprising if he gets over to the minimum from anyone. Like maybe he'll get like a 2-year, $6 million deal from, if some team wants to like divide up their mid level or something like that. But even that seems like who you've
he's
been
got good size,
right.
but
I mean, that's for defensive versatility is what you get him for. But and then the other like guy, and he's restricted, and he's not, again, this is more like a minimum or slightly above a minimum signing. Javon Carter in Phoenix, like they have cap room out there, like, and he is a great like ball defender. He can't do anything on offense but like take threes, but he actually hit a bunch of threes this year. I think he was like 38% from three. That would be, I mean, the Celtics need another 3-point shooter. And if the Suns use their cap room somewhere else, I can't see them letting him walk because he's probably not going to cost much. But if they go after a bigger fish and try to open up cap room for him, maybe he, slips through the cracks. But that'd be a nice, just like defensive minded guy that can shoot some threes to put at the end of your bench.
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have anything against Javon Carter, and I love that he's signed. I'm almost positive he's signed to An1 because he wears the Tai Chi sneakers. So shout out to him for that. But it's kind of like this weird duality where you're kind of like, okay, the players that I want to sign, I want them to be kind of like stopgaps during the regular season for Kemba or whoever, in case of injury, etc. But then also, like, I need this dude to play really well in his minutes, in his role in the playoffs. And because, like, we're trying to win a championship. So can this guy be on the floor in the NBA finals or the conference finals is kind of a question that I would be asking before I signed anybody. And I don't know, like, he's never played a playoff game in his career. I'm not saying that he couldn't, but
8-0 in the bubble, Mike. 8-0 in the bubble for those Suns. He had
undefeated, sure, yeah, no, and his
playoff level.
No, they were the best team in the bubble. They were better than the Lakers, in my opinion. No, so like I don't know, like that. It's an intriguing name for sure.
All right, so here's the final grab bag of minimum guys. And to see if anyone, like, these are all guys that break in case of emergency, end of the bench, but you want to throw them for 5 or 10 minutes in the playoff game. They might be able to give you something or just give you competent minutes. Your favorite guy, Brandon Knight.
Thomas.
Brandon. Oh, yeah. I mean, Isaiah Thomas might be top of the list in terms of these guys.
Is he on your list?
Technically, yeah. Like I mean, I went through pretty much all the point guards, so we'll start with Isaiah Thomas.
So technically
he's on the list.
I mean, I don't think you can. I think it would be really nice to see, like, he's one of the most beloved, like, athletes, period, in Boston in the past decade. That's like a fair statement to say. I think it's a little, if you were to actually bring him back, I think the great concern, at least maybe concern is too strong, but like for me, from looking at the outside, like he left as this heroic figure who was deeply connected to Boston, beloved, the leader of the team. Like after every game, that's where the press is going. That's who everyone wants to talk to. And so if he comes back, it's just like this weird chemistry thing could bubble at some point. And that would be like I'm not saying that it would or it wouldn't. That's just like a thing that I think about before I would bring Isaiah back, and how, I guess, strange it might seem if it was even possible. But like in terms of like basketball, like who knows what he has left, and who knows?
Right.
I mean, I know he had the surgery. I know he's working out in, I think, Seattle right now. I don't know how he looks. So, yeah. I mean,
I mean, it's not going to happen like here. I hope it happens for him somewhere. It's just not like, because that with the baggage, potential baggage that you mentioned from just a chemistry / awkwardness standpoint, and with I mean, there's also, we're forgetting about like Tremont Waters is like waiting for a roster spot here too. So you're not going to like, pick Isaiah, I think, over Waters, a guy that you've kind of groomed for the last year and want to give a shot to. But I hope the hip surgery did its job. I hope he's going to get a chance somewhere next year. It's going to be tough for him, to be honest. I think it's going to be really like 33% of players in the NBA are going to be free agents next year. And so when you look at that and I think the squeeze that a lot of these guys are going to feel in free agency, not even just to like make money, to even like find open roster spots. Because if you just, when you factor in the draft and everything, like that's guys are going to get squeezed out, and which makes it even tougher for a guy like Thomas or whoever to get another shot. So it's going to be fascinating to see who, like, which of those veterans get those chances.
Yeah, for sure. How many guys do you have on this list? Because I actually have a big who's really intriguing to me that I want to talk about. But if you want to run through some more,
this will be 1 minute here. These are the other names that are out there.
Okay.
Your favorite guy, Brandon Knight.
Yes, my boy.
Yes.
The one that got away.
Probably looking for more opportunity. So I'd say no. Trey Burke, who actually played really well for the Mavs, a guy the Sixers probably could use in that playoff series. He's probably the only other, and then beyond him, Yogi Ferrell, another small guy whose best days might be behind him. Shabazz, Roxbury native, would be a fun story. Actually had a good year with the Wizards. Again, another undersized, can't really play defense, so not much there. And then 2 guys that I have no interest in, Dellavedova and Emmanuel Mudiay. Not really an impressive crop. I mean, a couple like Augustine, a couple of decent guys at the top of the list for mid-level, but I'm not even sure you're better off. You're putting your resources here helps you too much compared to other positions. Like potentially a big, like you might have something for us on your hands here.
Yeah. I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for Brandon Knight for reasons we don't need to get into. But, I talked earlier about Robert Williams and Grant Williams, and I don't know what they're going to do at the 5 with some of the bigs that were on the team last year. But someone who's really intriguing, and this isn't like a surprising name, I don't think, to anyone who's been following this stuff over the past couple of weeks, is Harry Giles. And he's basically Jason Tatum's best friend.
Right.
He was the number 1 prospect in that class before multiple knee surgeries kind of derailed him a little bit. And when he's been healthy,
a Celtics favorite, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Well, no, just in terms of like going after guys that were highly rated in high school and saw their stock drop.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. The market inefficiency. So yeah, just like as a big man who, I mean, he's had a lot of health issues in the league. He's played for one of the most dysfunctional organizations, different coaches, different playing styles, different teammates. So it's kind of really hard to gauge just what we have here. But I think when you combine, the player he was supposed to be with what he has looked like in spots when he's finally been able to be healthy and be in a rotation and in a starting lineup for multiple weeks at a time, his skill set is just like really impressive. And I love, and I know Brad really likes as well, like bigs who can pass. He's a really good passer, really smart. ball mover, and you can throw it to him at the elbows and he'll hit back cutters and stuff. He has a decent jumper. And he's just that would be just a really fascinating piece to have. And if you hit with him, then it's like striking gold. So that's someone who I'm really fascinated by.
How much are you willing to give him? Are you giving him like the full tax pyramid level, so like $6 million? Are you giving him like half of that? Like, what do you think his? Well, I think some team wants to roll a dice on him because he's still only 22, right? Like,
if I was, I mean, where it gets interesting is like from his side, how long do you want the contract to be? You know what I mean? Like, how long before I get to hit the open market again? So the number of years is really interesting to me, even more so than the money. Because I mean, I would give him the full taxpayer if I was the Celtics, I think. I have to think a little bit more about that and, see what else is available. But that's someone who I'd be definitely interested in and exploring a little bit deeper, especially like the name of the game is keeping your franchise player happy. That's like really the most important thing that you have to do in the NBA right now. So if Jason Tatum is like, I really want to play with Harry Giles, and you have an opportunity to make that happen, you make it happen. That's just kind of what it is. So
you sign him, he has a breakout year, and then you can't keep him.
No, exactly. That's where it gets tricky. Like, how many years would you offer? I think, how many years can you offer with a taxpayer? I think it's 3 is
3
the
years
most you can offer. So do you offer him, a 3-year, what does it be, like $16 million contract or something like that? I mean, that's fine if you're the Celtics, in my opinion. I don't think maybe the 3rd year is is non-guaranteed, or it's a team option or a player option or whatever. So I just think that that's someone definitely worth discussing in a conversation like this.
Yeah, I can't believe the Kings turned down his 4th-year option, first of all.
Well, yeah, they're idiots. Sure.
Like, what?
The guy who did it is no longer there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that it's like, okay, we got to save that $4 million while you're giving like 22 to Buddy Hield. And this guy is 5 years younger. But yeah, you're right. Like there is clearly untapped potential here. Giles is a really good rebounder, really good finisher at the rim. And like you said, his was shot 39% from outside of 16 feet to 3-point range. Didn't take any threes, but there is a semblance of a jump shot there. So I could see him being a pretty, that seems to be like a pretty good compliment to like Grant Williams at the power forward spot / center with Rob Williams there, in terms of like, you can kind of mix and match with those 3 guys on a nightly basis, conceivably, depending on what you need in your offense that night, or if you want to focus on defense. You play Grant at the 5 and you go smaller. Yeah, that is from a Tatum standpoint, I do think it will be, if signing Giles gets Tatum to sign that, 5th year without a player option, then you get that contract ready to go, I think, if you're Danny Ainge.
100%. Do you feel, what are your thoughts just generally about like the big man need?
I think it's overstated.
Mm-hmm. Where do you feel that, I'm sure you've discussed this many times before, but like, where is the point of their needing an upgrade on this roster, in your opinion?
I think the biggest is just another reliable wing / backcourt player that you can play in the postseason. Because I don't think you're going to get a meaningful upgrade. I mean, like Giles, I could see taking a chance on because he's young, and if you sign him for 3 years, you could get some really good value out of that. But for me, when you look at what happened last postseason, and it was like, guys got hurt if we had a full roster. Well, guys have gotten hurt every postseason for this team for the last 3 or 4 years. So I think you have the opportunity now where if Hayward comes back, you have a strong core in place, but you have to give yourself better backup there than just like Brad Wanamaker, who, to be honest, I thought like overachieved for a lot of that playoffs with his shooting and stuff. But then when push came to shove in that Heat series, he really couldn't, his flaws were exposed. So whether that's just a versatile wing, whether that's, a true point guard that can, shoot and distribute and not be a huge hole, like just someone you can throw in. So when the Heat throw that 2-3 zone at you or whatever else they try to do, or throw double teams at Tatum or whatever else, you don't have to be dependent on, Smart taking threes to like get you out of it.
That's fair. That's all very fair.
Dude, what do you think? Do you think would you rather have just the big and then like, because I'm not sure how much that solves your issues in the postseason, like a mid-level big.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me is just like watching, maybe it was just the finals in that particular matchup. But one of the interesting wrinkles that I thought was on display in the playoffs, in later rounds in particular, was like guys on the floor who were wings or big guards or whatever, who could just get attacked relentlessly on the defensive end by having their man, whoever they were guarding, was going to set a ball screen for Jimmy Butler, or set a ball screen for LeBron, or set a ball screen for Jamal Murray, or whoever it was. And that was kind of like how offenses were really like attacking in spots for like big chunks of the later rounds of the playoffs. And so I think like what I'm trying to say is that whoever you bring in, you really can't have someone who gets just so exposed on that end of the floor. And they're not like Duncan Robinson was on the floor getting just brutalized, but he's also the best shooter on the planet,
right?
Or in the bubble. So that's what's keeping his minutes alive. I think that is just a really important general thing that you need to be wary of if you want to win a title now, and if you are going to be going to the finals or the conference finals or whatever, you're gonna go up against a player who's probably like LeBron or like Kawhi, who will hunt down matchups that they want. And so I think that is just generally a big deal. And I wish that the Celtics did it more offensively against the Miami Heat in the conference finals, but Tatum was just too young, I guess.
Harsh lessons. But you're right. It's like finding, and the amount of those type of guys available in free agency, especially this year, are low. So they're going to be highly, sought after. Even a guy like, we talked about Galloway, like, you hope his 3-point shooting would outweigh his defensive woes. He's not like a terrible defender, but he's definitely not a plus on that side. So you have to find just the perfect, like you said, with Duncan Robinson, the guy whose, strengths outweigh the faults for whatever the 15, 20 minutes he's on the floor, and it matters.
Yeah. Exactly.
So any other sneaky bigs you like before we move on to just some big picture NBA stuff to wrap up?
Not really. What's Aaron Baines' deal? Is that could you see something like that happening, or would he cost too much money, or because he would be really valuable, I think.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense from a Celtics perspective. I would think he gets more than the taxpayer mid-level. I think someone would give him, like, he made enough threes last year to where I think someone.
He was like the MVP of the first month of the season,
right? Which was insane because the Celtics literally gave him away. But obviously, then he came back down to earth and injuries cropped up, which they tend to do with him. So, I mean, the Suns, it'll be interesting to see why the Suns do. They could easily bring him back. He's good insurance for Ayton. He obviously fits there. But they might have, bigger fish they want to go after via trade or in free agency itself. So if he does miss, I would go after him if he's on the market if you're the Celtics, but I don't think he's going to be available to them at a price that's they can afford.
Tragic.
But there is, I mean, you look at the number of bigs that are out here quickly, like, Bach is probably going back to Toronto because they need, if they're losing Gasol, they're going to need him. Tristan Thompson will be highly sought after. Derek Favors will be out there. Again, all these teams could re-sign, but especially Favors, I'm not sure he makes too much sense for them now. And then
my love affair with Derek Favors is like endless. Astronomical. It is. It's so deep. I would basically react the same way if they ever signed Derek Favors as I did when they signed KG. Like, just Derek Favors, just like the missing ingredient. But it's like, but really, when we talk about like bigs, this is kind of a segue into our next conversation, but like the Philadelphia 76ers aren't going anywhere.
Nope.
Joel Embiid, maybe Daryl Morey trades Joel Embiid for James Harden and then you don't have to worry about it. But Joel Embiid is in your conference, in your division. They've gone up against the Sixers, twice, 3 times in the last, it's like 4
playoffs.
3 years. Yeah. Yeah. So that's someone who, especially, I would imagine that they are going to have a much better and more sensible supporting cast because Daryl Morey is now the guy making those decisions and finding those players, and he's really good at accentuating his star power. So you're not going to just be able to double team Joel Embiid and he's going to throw the ball away. It's not going to be like that, I think, next year. And Doc Rivers is the coach now, and I'm a big fan of him. So got to worry about him. So we talk about like bigs and how the big man market isn't that crucial and you wouldn't want to spend too much on a big. I think finding someone who can bother Joel Embiid in the post without like in single coverage a little bit is like, it's integral.
Right. And so that, Baines and Favors would be a pretty strong one too there. Tristan Thompson also could be in that mix. Cantor did a respectable job on Embiid, but that was with his entire supporting cast being gone. So, I mean, Cantor's future in Boston is, I'd say, iffy. But if he's gone, then you're gonna have to look at one of those guys I mentioned. Or, I mean, there's probably a bunch of veteran minimum bigs, but like none of them can, I guess to your point, none of them can really guard Embiid or bother Embiid slightly in one-on-one coverage. So it's like it's tough to really count on that for insurance when you're gonna need them. It's not going to be very useful.
Right, like someone like, just off the top of my head, like Mason Plumley.
Sure.
Intriguing big, like really good passer, etc. I think he'll be too expensive, and I don't know about his post defense in a matchup like that, but
Biyombo. Yeah. Bismack Biyombo. That's what you're looking at.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'd take Cantor over that if given the choice. But all right, let's go to Morey to wrap up here and just the big picture situation with that. I wrote about it a little bit on Boston Sports this week. Like the Atlantic Division was already tough enough, like going forward with Toronto, Brain Trust looking as good as ever, and they have some options going forward. Brooklyn with KD coming back and Kyrie getting healthy, Steve Nash, jury's out there, but you'd think that's
Mike D'Antoni,
right? Like the offenses should be sensational there, given the brain power there. And now you have Morey going to a situation in Philly it's a bit of a mess, but he's a pretty creative guy that can, maximize a mess essentially, and with a lot more resources than he had in Houston ever. And so all this to me is just like, the Celtics, the road just got tougher in terms of getting out of the East for the foreseeable future and, getting through that crew, and then obviously Milwaukee and Miami.
I don't really know who. Like, I can't. It's too early to order these teams. Honestly, I mean, it's before the draft and before the offseason, so
Right.
like, of course, it is too early. But Brooklyn, it has to be respected because of the best two players, and most predominantly their best player, who might be the best player.
You mean
in the
like
league
Karis
next year.
LeVert and KD?
Exactly. Yes, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Philly, Toronto, Miami, Boston, Milwaukee. It's just kind of honestly a toss-up to me with how these teams are going to shake out in the playoffs. Not so much the regular season, but the playoffs. I think the situation in Philly is not that terrible. I mean, if you're Daryl Morey, the first thing you do when you go in there is like you got to move on. You got to find some way to get rid of Al Horford, and you had to find you potentially, like, if I was Daryl Morey, like, before I try to move on from Simmons or Embiid, I would look at the data from previous regular seasons offensively and see that they've had success before. It's all about finding the right pieces to complement them. And if that still doesn't work, then you can, I think, figure out which one you want to keep and which one you want to build around, et cetera. But like moving Horford, what's really interesting is that Morey, for the first time in forever, has a draft pick in this year's draft. I think it's from the Oklahoma City Thunder because Philly's own pick is going to Brooklyn, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, that's correct.
And then he has all of his own picks going forward.
Right.
So getting off of, I don't think it's like, Horford's contract is bad. Horford is not, you could easily buy into, I think there's several teams around the league that would be like, that contract is not desirable if we're getting a pick with it. And it's still, Al Horford, it's not like a carcass. It's a player who you could be like, this guy was not in an ideal situation last year. He was playing out of position. There were times where he was at the 5 and the Philly was fine, perfectly fine.
Right.
Still like a pretty good player. So I think getting off Horford is not going to be that difficult for someone like Daryl Morey. I think everybody else should like have their bags packed and ready to go. So I think someone like Josh Richardson would be a really attractive trade piece that teams would be interested in. And I could see him moving. I could see Daryl moving. I could see Thibault being attached to a Tobias Harris with a pick and seeing what you can get. Because if I'm Philly, like I could have won the title with Jimmy Butler as my third guy. So if I'm, why are you shaking your head?
Well, it's true. It's like you literally traded away, you gave away Jimmy Butler for Josh Richardson, Horford, and Harris for like twice the money, which is just screwed you up on so many levels.
Yeah. So if I can just rewind, and I'm not gonna get Jimmy again, but like, honestly, that team could win the title if they had a bunch of like competent shooting and CJ McCollum as the third guy. Like, a team could easily win the title if Joel Embiid bought in, and if I guess just Ben Simmons kind of, I'm not going to say learn how to shoot, but is just himself, honestly. And he's this, if he's like playing like one of the best defensive players in the NBA, which he is, like, I don't know. I think that with enough spacing, like, which is easier said than done to add around those pieces, but with spacing, it could be like a devastating team. I think like the whole going big idea, like that was a one and done situation. Daryl Morey is going to invest in shooting. He's going to invest in, I would imagine, some more ball handling, and he's going to
imagine that a point guard in Philly, like that would be.
It'd be great.
Like 3 years.
They're probably going to get one. And like all you got to do, honestly, like I've said this before, but everyone talks about Ben Simmons need to shoot, and I think he needs to shoot. That's straight up. In the playoffs, it's just a different ball game if you want to be a primary ball handler. But like, they would be so much better if Doc Rivers went to Joel Embiid and was like, guess what? You're not shooting from the mid-range. Like, that's gone from your diet. And this is what we're investing in. And this is what we're going to prioritize going forward. Like, all of a sudden their offense is that much, because those are all wasted possessions. They just are. And so you take those away. Joel Embiid is such a special player. I just think, like, you can't count out Philly. I don't think Philly will look anything like they did last year.
Yep, and that's, I think, it's scary. And they still, with the amount of talent they have with your top two guys, that's a scary proposition because they have never been effectively utilized, I think, during their breakout, to your point.
Yep, and that is why when you're in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Miami Heat, you should have probably beat the Miami Heat, because everything changes every year so dramatically in the NBA.
It's true. And soon enough, we should be able to analyze what that NBA season next year will actually look like. Recording this on Friday now, and at some point, hopefully by the end of next week, maybe by the time you listen to this, they will have, the league and the Player Association will have settled on a schedule and free agency numbers and all that good stuff. But we'll be revisiting that in the upcoming weeks here as we get you ready for the draft and free agency on the Winning Plays Pod. In the meantime, hit us up at Winning Plays Pod on Twitter. You can get Mike at Michael V. Pina on Twitter. I'm at Brian T. Robb. And make sure you rate, review, subscribe to the Winning Plays Podcast, because if you're listening right now, then you really should be, keeping track of this because you made it. That's about it, Mike. We'll get back. You think this is going to get done over the weekend or early next week? When do you think we're going to actually have some hard numbers to talk about from the week-wide perspective?
I would imagine, like, next week you have to, because if the season starts on the 22nd of December, training camp, it's just this, teams need to be ready, rearing to go December 1st. So yeah, I would imagine that we got to get something going sooner than later.
Lakers are going to show up to training camp on December 15th and just play their G League for the first 2 weeks of the regular season. That's the prediction here. But
AKA everyone on their roster except LeBron James. Anthony Davis.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you guys next week.